Around the world in San Diego and a lifestyle away from the Versace empire, Andrew Cunanan started small but also had designs on doing big things. Andrew was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he was raised as if he was.
He was the adored baby fourth child, and he was treated like a little emperor.
Maureen Orth, a Dateline consultant, wrote the book on Cunanan, Vulgar Favors.
He was the product of an extremely dysfunctional family, a very unhappy marriage, a Filipino father who was incredibly materialistic and pretentious, and a Sicilian mother who was sort of beaten down by the father who had her own mental health issues.
Andrew adored his father, mostly ignored his mother, and focused on getting what he wanted for himself, according to his close friend Stacy Lopez.
He always had a big want list, oh, I want that, I would like that.
Fancy car?
Yes, and I think going to a school like Bishop's, some kids drove to school in a Lamborghini.
Roman Jimenez, a freelance journalist, was editor of Update, a San Diego gay and lesbian newspaper.
He had brains, and he had looks, and he had charm.
I remember when he came to school, he just had such a big personality.
Even at that stage, huh?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I thought he was very brave because back in the early 80s, generally people were not openly gay, and he was.
Out and proud, but never at home.
Due to religious reasons, he felt his family would not be as accepting.
He hid his homosexuality from his family forever.
But Andrew and Stacy accepted each other unconditionally, as his inscription in her yearbook attests.
Can you read that?
Sure.
Thanks.
It's too bad I'm gay, or I'd be madly in love with you. Love always, Andrew.
Andrew spent time with wealthier men who could help keep him in a life that he aspired to.
He was a boy toy.
Sure.
A boy toy who liked to show off the gifts he received.
He had come to the dance in this red leather jumpsuit.
Oh,
and
boy.
I remember going, wow, Andrew. He says, yes, my boyfriend Anthony bought it for me.
Stacy liked to tease Andrew about his dating choices.
I said, oh, so who's your sugar daddy now? And he was like, oh, wouldn't you like to know? Most of us had to study, but you never saw him in the library studying.
Coasted through.
Exactly.
So, was it a prophecy when on graduation in 1987, he was voted most likely to be remembered?
He just had a very dynamic personality and was very funny, and everybody loved him.
After Bishop's, Andrew tried college, but the boy who coasted through high school found UC San Diego altogether too demanding and costly, so he bailed.
I think Andrew grew up thinking that maybe the world owed him a living, and he didn't really have to work for things.
For the older men in his life and others, Andrew invented a new identity for himself, Andrew De Silva, and made up stories about a gilded past, about accomplishments that never were, and impressed those men by appearing well-read and cultured, told them he loved art and opera. So Andrew was moving in more elite circles now and traveling. He went to the San Francisco Opera House in 1990, and a chance meeting afterwards would change his life and change history. That meeting was with Gianni Versace, who was in San Francisco designing costumes, as this sketch shows, for the opera Capriccio.
There was a party where Versace was going to appear, and Andrew's friends scored some tickets. And so during the party, he claimed, and other people claimed, that Andrew met Versace.
Mind you, Antonio, remember him, Versace's partner? He was at the party and claimed that meeting never happened. But Andrew's excitement was off the charts. He couldn't contain himself with some of his friends.
And he jumped on the foot of their bed and said, I met Versace, I met Versace, I met Versace. He was so thrilled that he had done it.
He admired everything the superstar designer had achieved: fame, fortune, and freedom as a confident gay man. But there was one difference as big as a runway is long. Andrew Cunanan wasn't willing to work for any of it. And that meant disappointment and trouble might lay ahead.
Andrew didn't like to work really hard, but he liked nice things. I fully expected him to be in a relationship with somebody older that was catering to his needs.
Sure enough, in 1994, Cunanan scored. He was still posing as Andrew De Silva when he met a wealthy older man who seemed, for a time, happy to pay the bills.
Norman Blatchford belonged to a very secretive, very affluent gay fraternity called Gamma Mu. They would have these very lavish meals and brunches and dances.
And when he wasn't brunching and dancing with the older guys, he liked hanging out with the beautiful young crowd in the Hillcrest neighborhood, San Diego's gay place to see and be seen.
Jeff Trail was the all-American boy, a graduate of the Naval Academy. Politically conservative. He hated drugs. He didn't drink.
The friendship worked for a while, and while Jeff shied away from drugs, Andrew didn't. Desperate to be noticed, he'd do almost anything, legal or not.
So he became the drug dealer, he became the procurer, he became the guy who connected people together, and he was the one who always picked up the dinner tab.
With Norman's money, of course. But in 1995, as Norman's kept man, Andrew met a handsome young architect named David Madsen and fell in love. And Andrew was on top of the world, finally living the good life he felt entitled to. This was the best it would ever get. For months, he juggled his benefactor Norman and his lover David, until in the fall of 1996, the man with the money got wise.
Andrew wanted a Mercedes, and he tells Norman that unless he can have a Mercedes, he's going to walk out. And Norman says, okay, go ahead.
Norman's rejection began a kind of implosion, and then, like a line of dominoes, his social world came tumbling down. The love of his life, David Madsen, broke up with him. His friend, Jeff Trail, moved on, told friends they'd had a falling out. And the mayor of Hillcrest began a rapid decline.
By early 1997, both Jeff Trail and David Madsen had moved away, both coincidentally to Minneapolis, and a rootless and unwanted Andrew Cunanan had gotten fat and puffy.
He had told me that he was very depressed, and he's like, I'm fat and I don't look good and nobody's gonna want me.
And when he picked up a fashion magazine now, he read about all the things he didn't have, would never have. He could read about Elton John's glittering 50th birthday party in London, for instance, where Gianni Versace was a guest. That is when, in his own small world in San Diego, Cunanan planned a party of his own, a last supper with his few remaining friends. Told them he was moving to San Francisco, but that first
He was going to Minneapolis to settle some business, as he put it.
But it's clear now, Andrew Cunanan wasn't planning any move to San Francisco. What his friends couldn't have known was that he'd bought a one-way ticket to Minneapolis. Whatever happened there, he had no intention of coming back.
I spoke to the waiter from the restaurant, and at the end of the meal, he remembers Andrew Cunanan leaning back in his chair and looking at his friends and saying, all of you think you know the real Andrew, but none of you really know the truth.